Good evening, and thank you for coming to our annual League of Women Voters Candidates Night. My name is Judy Jacobson, and I serve as the League's Voter Service Director. Before we begin, I would like to introduce our new president, Julie Meir Harnack. Our League members are delighted to have her with us. Her wit, enthusiasm, and superb organizational skills will be put to good use in this exciting election season and in the years ahead. Thank you, Julie. I also want to thank our co-sponsors, the women's group of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Shelter Rock, which has absorbed the cost of using this beautiful facility, and the American Association of University Women, which has helped us with publicity and provided many of the snacks tonight. In addition, a big thank you to PATV for allowing these forums to reach a much larger audience. Tonight, we have candidates for two different elective offices in the state of New York. The League of Women Voters of Port Washington, Manhasset had originally planned to include a Martin Swazi forum tonight. However, the logistics of the Martins-Pideaux Republican primary date prevented us from doing that. We hope to reschedule that forum in the near future. However, there will be a Martin Swazi forum in Huntington on November 1st. A flyer with all the information is on the table. According to the Federal Election Commission, if a candidate is running for a federal office, a debate cannot be held unless there are at least two candidates face-to-face. There cannot be a substitute for a candidate. Therefore, if only one candidate is present, there is no option. The FEC regulations state that this holds even if a candidate simply does not show up at the last minute. Thus, not only do FEC rules prohibit the League of Women Voters from proceeding with a contested debate for national office when only one candidate is present. Our own League's nonpartisan policy would be jeopardized by going forward with what is called an empty chair debate. Please note, the biographies of the candidates are on the chairs. If you need more information about the candidates or you need to find out where to go vote, go to our League-sponsored website. There's a sign up there, vote411.org. There are flyers in the hall and on this table as well that describe that site. And now, I am pleased to present our moderator, Ms. Marion Fleming. Ms. Fleming comes to us from the Central Nassau League of Women Voters. As is our custom, our moderator does not live in the district represented by any of the candidates. Marion will read the ground rules for the evening and then call on the candidates for their opening statements. Ms. Marie Bellon, why don't you wave, is our timekeeper. We hope you will consider joining the League of Women Voters. Please take home a membership brochure for yourself or a member of your family. The League is a good government organization, and remember, the League is not for women only. Here is our moderator, Marion Fleming.
Thank Judy. Good evening. I'm pretty sure that there are some people in the audience who have seen me here before. I live in Hempstead, and every traffic light from Hempstead to this place stopped me. Such a relief to be here, and I know that we're going to have a wonderful debate. I will now read the procedures for the evening. The candidates for the same office have drawn lots to determine the order of speaking. Cards for written questions will be distributed by volunteers from the League of Women Voters. Cards will be collected by these volunteers and vetted by League members to assure that they are legible and not repetitive or abusive. Questions must be confined to the issues in the campaign. The questioners should make sure that their questions require 1 minute or less to read. Each candidate will be allowed 3 minutes for an opening statement. After all candidates have spoken, the moderator will read questions from the cards. Questions may be addressed to a specific individual or the candidates in general, although all candidates will be given an opportunity to answer a question addressed to a specific individual. Each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to answer a question. Each candidate will be given a red card that may be used if he wishes to rebut a response. When making a rebuttal, the candidate will hold up the red card and be recognized by the moderator. The candidate may use his rebuttal card 3 times only. Each candidate will have 1 minute for a rebuttal. The moderator will keep track of the use of the red card. A League member will act as timekeeper, and the timekeeper will hold up signs indicating 30 seconds remaining and time. When the time is up, the speaker will be allowed to finish the sentence. Candidates will have 2 minutes for a closing statement and will speak in the same order as the opening statement. Since the purpose of the meeting is to determine the candidates' views, no substitute speakers will be allowed to appear should the candidates be unable to attend. The use of props, charts, or visuals, and the distribution of campaign literature is prohibited. Any recording of the debate must be approved beforehand by the League of Women Voters. If shown, the recording must be shown in its entirety. Snippets may not be used for advertising purposes. The candidates have drawn straws and will read their opening statements accordingly. Our first forum will be the 2 candidates vying to represent New York State Senate District 7, formerly Jack Martin's district. The first candidate to make an opening statement is Adam Haber.
You can hang out over there all night. First, I want to just take a moment to thank everybody for coming out on this beautiful October evening, my opponent for showing up tonight, the League of Women Voters for sponsoring us, and the Unitarian Church for giving us this beautiful facility. My name is Adam Haber. I'm running for state senate because I love this community and I want to be a force for positive change. It's a passion for me. We're all lucky to live here, but the truth is we face collective challenges that need to be addressed. We continue to face a crushing property tax burden, and part of that stems from the fact that Long Island pays far more into Albany than it gets back in services. We need to make sure that families aren't getting priced out of this area, and that requires a vigorous advocate for our state senate. We face public health risks that must be addressed. The heroin epidemic is real, and it's tearing families apart. It also remains far too easy for the wrong people to acquire guns in this state, and I aim to make our community safe. Our environment is beautiful but fragile. The problems of illegal dumping, threats to our water supply, and diminishing green spaces must all be addressed. Environmental disasters that are much easier to prevent than they are to fix. That goes for climate change as well. And tying this all together, I think, is the issue of how government and our elected officials behave. Corruption is a problem on Long Island and in New York State. It affects both parties. We absolutely need more transparency in our campaigns and in our government. We need stiffer penalties for politicians who break the laws. Reduce corruption, and you get a government fixed on fixing problems, not politicians who are in it for themselves. These are the issues that I'm running on, and they're the issues that go to the question of what kind of community do you want this to be? The first office I ever ran for was Roslyn School Board. At the time, millions of dollars were being stolen from our children's education. My wife, Renee, encouraged me to step up when this terrible situation was unfolding, and I'm grateful for her and believing me to make a difference. Once elected, I got to work to keep services and programs intact, not losing one teacher, but saving our schools money by seemingly simple fixes like refinancing debt and consolidating services between districts. I am proud of my record on the school board and the fact that Roslyn has kept well below the tax cap. In fact, since I joined the board in 2009, we have kept taxes lower than any other K-12 district in all of Nassau County. I took those same principles to the Nassau Interim Finance Authority, otherwise known as NIFA. Once again, I made transparency and cost savings my top priorities and fought corruption head-on by reforming the county's bidding process and requiring additional transparency measures. That's just some of my background, but more important part of this campaign is you. It's about our values. I want to be your voice in Albany, to be this community's advocate. I will always put Long Island first. This is our home, it's where we raise our children, it's where we hope to retire, and it's a great place to live. I'm looking forward to engaging on all these issues today and during the campaign, and I hope to earn your support in November. Thanks so much.
We will now hear from Elaine Phillips.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Elaine Phillips, and I'm the mayor of the village of Flower Hill. I'd like to thank the League tonight for hosting tonight's event, and I'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming tonight. This is such an important night, and it's a very important election. So what do we love about Long Island? For me, it's the unique communities, from Floral Park to Hicksville, Elmont to right here on the North Shore. It's our beautiful environment, our fresh air, clean water. It's our excellent schools, among the very best in the world. I'm running for state senate because I want to protect the Long Island that we love, where we live and where we raise our families. And I want to create a better future for our children and our grandchildren to enjoy. We face challenges. Our high cost of living makes it tough for young families trying to start out. For families and our senior citizens, the very people that built these communities. So affordability is my first priority, reducing the cost of living by cutting taxes. I did it as a mayor, 4 years in a row, and I plan to do it in Albany. We need better opportunities for jobs in the strong economy. I will find and cut red tape to help our hard-working small business owners. We also have to protect our environment, drinking water and air. I'm proud of my record as a mayor to keep pollution out of our harbors and Long Island Sound and to protect our drinking water. It's why I've been endorsed by New York's most important environmental league, the League of Conservation Voters. And we need to restore trust and confidence in Albany. In my village, I enacted a tougher ethics law and created more transparency, and I will work to clean up Albany's corruption. There's one more reason why this race is so important. Maybe the most important issue. It's the issue of balance. Your choice in this election could very well decide whether Long Island, our communities, will continue to have a voice in our state government. That's because a vote for my opponent will mean that every part of this government, the governor, the assembly, and the Senate, will be controlled by New York City politicians. And we know from experience that when New York City controls state government, Long Island loses out. We lose out on school aid, on tax relief, investments, infrastructure, and economic support. So when you make your choice in the voting booth on November 8th, I want you to compare our records. Compare our records on tax relief, protecting our environment, and our commitment to honest and ethical government. And please think of the difference your vote can make in ensuring that Long Island maintains a voice in state government. Thank you.
No worries.
Yes. Yes. We will now hear from our first speaker. No. Yes, I will ask, but who is it, Judy? Who is the first speaker? Adam. All right.
You're
Just
next
one
state senate,
moment.
right?
Mr. Haber's campaign says we will cut taxes. What is his tax record on the Roslyn School Board? Mr. Haber.
Excellent point. I came into a school board after a horrific $11.2 million theft. I was one of the first people elected after that board in the scandal. And since that time, Roslyn has been a beacon of efficiency. Of every school district in Nassau County, we've got the lowest tax levy increase of any district of the 50 in the whole district. We've done such incredible things as refinanced our debt, cooperative busing among districts. I even created a foundation where there's a credit card where the cash back goes to the school district. We came from a horrific place, and now we're one of the most efficient, if not best, school districts in all of New York State. And we've done that in many more ways, which I won't get into, but I want to just talk about balance very briefly that my opponent brought up. We have a big decision to make, and that's going to be a theme of her campaign today. We could have a president from New York. We could have a state senate who's Democratic, an assembly who's Democratic, a congressman who's Democratic, and a federal senator who's a leader of the Senate who's Democratic. So we haven't gotten all these fair share of amount of our money that we deserve, and I really think that the balance that we're going to have hasn't been working for us, and I hope to get into that more today. But my tax record on the school district will only be aided by the additional aid we'll get back if we have a state senate in Albany that's Democratic. Thanks.
Oh, I do? I'm sorry. Oh, I don't. Okay.
Could I rebut her rebuttal? Okay.
So, property tax cap. It is probably the most important thing that has passed in the state government in years. It has saved Nassau County over $800 million in taxes. That is huge. As a village mayor, I have cut taxes 4 years in a row. I have a record. And I have to say, Mr. Haber, that you are quoted in 2014 when you were running against Senator Martins, saying that you will oppose any and all future taxes, but you came back to the Roslyn School Board and you raised taxes again. According to Newsday, Roslyn has the highest tax rate. Roslyn School District has the highest tax rate in the 7th Senate District. So I have a record. I will cut taxes. I will work with and make sure we can afford to live here on Long Island.
So this is the red card, right? Absolutely. So let's just talk about my opponent's record. She was on the board of Flower Hill when Tom DiNapoli did a scathing audit of how poorly the village was run. As a matter of fact, over the 5 years of that audit, when she was on the trustee the last year, there was $8.6 million in additional money that was necessary of a $3 million budget of a village. That's an extraordinary sum of money. There were 27 counts in that audit that basically said how poorly the village is run. She's kept taxes essentially flat. She should have lowered taxes dramatically. She's raised her budget 11% in those same years, but it's just semantics. It's a balanced tax cap. You can check the records. 50-plus districts in all of Nassau County, and Roslyn has the lowest tax levy of any period. We haven't lost a teacher. We've expanded services. We're a beacon of excellence. Our home values are higher than any other district, and the tax rate is a function of commercial property. It's a nebulous number that you can make up and compare. It doesn't really mean anything about how much you're taxed. It's just how many commercial properties you have versus residential. It's meaningless. So check the record. There was a horrific audit in her district. We're a beacon of excellence. We just had an audit that was perfect, and that's where we stand.
Ms. Phillips, your rebuttal.
So what Mr. Haber said is just outright wrong. Outright wrong. The village of Flower Hill did have a New York State audit, and it was for years that I didn't even live in the village of Flower Hill. And the fact is the mayor before me, and I continued his efforts to clean up the village. I am proud. Everything the audit reflected, the village of Flower Hill corrected. So I cannot speak for the Board of Trustees prior to my time on the board, but the fact is what Mr. Haber said, and $8 million, I don't even know where he got that number. Go look. Check my record. Check our tax levy, and it will show you it went down every year.
We're now ready for question number 2. Ms. Phillips, you will speak first.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think it would benefit the 7th senatorial district to have essentially one-party rule, since 6 years ago that really was a disaster for us? Higher taxes, and our school aid was cut.
So the answer to that question is absolutely no, but it's even beyond the 7th Senate District. I am a believer in bipartisan government. I believe we need checks and balances. We need the right side and we need the left side. And as a village mayor, I have appointed 4 out of the 5 members of my board of trustees. Never did I ask what political affiliation that they were with, because quite frankly, it didn't matter. They were the right people for the job. But when it comes to 2009, 2010, it was a disaster for Long Island. We got $14 billion of new spending and $14 billion of new taxes because we had a single-party government. New York City controlled New York State. School taxes, school aid was cut by $124 million. Roslyn, $4 million. Manhasset, $4 million. Great Neck, $8 million. We cannot afford on Long Island to go back to a single-party government. Thank you.
Well, I wish we had a fact checker here, but I just want to make sure that when we do the fact checking, she was a trustee on the board during the time of the audit, so that's the first fact.
When the audit came out.
The second
When
fact
the audit
was,
came out.
you wait your turn. The second fact was, Roslyn doesn't even have $4 million in school aid, so that number is ridiculous. I want to just give you some facts. The state Senate's been Republican for all but 2 of the last 50 years. In Long Island, we have 17% of the students, yet we get 12% of the aid. New York City got $300 million in universal pre-K money. Our children didn't get that money. New York City got $54 million in charter school money. That's more money than they asked for by the governor, but the Republicans doubled that. More people have left New York State in the last 10 years than in any other state in the country. This is always voted one of the worst places to do business. We can't do any worse. This is the amount of time it takes to get a permit on Long Island is longer than anywhere else in the country. Businesses are leaving in droves. You've had 9 Republican state senators for a very long time. It's just not working. And a 4th grade civics lesson would be the balance in government is the executive and the judiciary and the legislative branch. We have an assembly, we have a state senate, we have an executive. That's balance. Republican, Democrat, how's that working, by the way, in Washington, D.C.? Really not very good. It's not working in Albany. There's corruption that's rife with some of the crazy stuff you could ever imagine. This is a place that I love. If we keep electing the same people, you're going to get the same results. And I just want to share a quote with you and end with this. People who want to keep the status quo benefit from the status quo. If you think things are going well, and I know they're not because this is a very expensive place to live, then by all means vote for her. But if not, and you want change and fresh ideas, which we'll have today, please support me.
Question number 3. Mr. Haber, you
Yes.
will answer it first. And I'd like to ask you, ladies and gentlemen, please, the stop sign, and be very cordial to each other, please. Gun control versus gun education. How would gun education stop Newtown, Connecticut from occurring?
So whose question is this, mine?
It's yours. Mr. Haber, yes.
That's an interesting point about Newtown, Connecticut, because my brother teaches there. And I think gun control versus gun education would have stopped Newtown. I think the laws that are in place right now aren't sufficient to protect our families. I'm not afraid to stand up to the RRA or the gun lobby. The SAFE Act, we put that in place after Newtown, after Sandy Hook. I didn't know if my brother was dead or alive, but thank God he was okay. That was attempted to be repealed by the Republican State Senate. Micro-stamping of bullets. It's a great tool to give to the police. We want to make sure that they're well armed and they have all the tools they need to keep the bad guys out of jail. Bad guys in jail and arrest them. That's something that's been blocked by the New York State Senate Republicans. There's a no-fly law for terrorists, right? With terrorists who are on the no-fly law, they should not be able to have guns. They should be taken away. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe that you have a right to own guns, but clearly there's laws that are in place that are consistently being blocked. And I believe in common sense gun control. I think we both have a different view of what common sense gun control is, but I'm concerned because the mentally ill children, the last point is there's a law called Nicholas's Law that a gun owner should be responsible for his firearm, and if it's not on him, it should be locked up. These are laws that have been all blocked by the Republican State Senate who are in the pocket of the gun lobby, and I'm for protecting our families, and these are ways you can do it very specifically.
Phillips?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So common sense gun legislation is something that Mr. Haber and I absolutely agree on. The fact is, New York State, including the SAFE Act, has the toughest gun laws in all 50 states in the United States. And I think my opponent is missing the point here. The problem we have is illegal guns. It is illegal guns coming across the state borders. It is illegal guns that are in the hands of all the bad people. And what do we need to do that? We need to give law enforcement the support and the resources that they need to get these illegal guns off the street. I have been honored with the endorsements of 19 different law enforcement agencies. They understand this is where we need to put our resources and our support to make sure that illegal guns are off the streets. Mr. Haber mentioned in our last debate that he was held up by gunpoint 2 different times in New York City, many years ago, but 2 different times. That gun wasn't a legal gun. That was an illegal gun. We've got to get illegal guns, and I agree with you on the no-fly list. Somebody on the no-fly list should not be receiving a gun.
Question number, that was question number 3.
I think it's number 4, ma'am.
Number 4 now,
Yeah.
yes, it is number 4. And the first speaker will be you
Okay.
for that one. What do you plan to do on behalf of our veterans regarding support after service?
Thank you. So our veterans, the most important citizens that we have, I mean, they defended, they took and put their lives at risk to protect the democracy of the United States. And I have been honored to speak and meet with many veterans organizations. And I'll tell you what they'd say, or they have told me. A lot of it has to do with their buildings, their infrastructure. I was down in Elmont at the American Legion, and the commander looked at me as I was doing a meet and greet there, and she said, you know, this building costs us so much money. So I sat there and I thought, and I have a good relationship with PSE&G, and I said, let me see what I can do. 2 nights ago, I was back down at the American Legion in Elmont, and she told the group, she said, you know what? Mayor Phillips came down here. 6 weeks later, we're getting LED lighting at a discounted rate, and we're going to save thousands of dollars in our electric bill in the future. So this is what we can do. That's one example of what we can do for our veterans. The VA hospitals have been a disaster, an absolute disaster. We need to focus. We need to give our veterans the resources that they deserve and the respect that they deserve.
Mr. Haber?
Thank you. So we're here having this debate because of the fact that our men and women in the armed services are fighting for our protections and our way of life. And we both agree that we love our veterans. There's no two ways about that. I think that we're completely doing a disservice to our veterans the way they're being treated here on Long Island, which has a very large population of veterans. We had the GI Bill after World War II. It helped people find jobs, got them education, housing. What happened to that? What happened to that? So the things I'm going to focus on, and I've had this discussion with many veterans groups, the things they need desperately are affordable housing. They need job creation, the money for entrepreneurship. There are people who want to start jobs who fought for us, who need to have a grant to make sure they can fulfill their dreams after they've protected us. And we've got to fight for better health care. You can't have the men and women who served us wait online or for months for procedures. It's unconscionable. One of the ideas I have that I shared with a group recently was I think the ways to expand our economy is through tourism, and I want to create a bike race, a state-of-the-art bike race, a 100-mile bike race throughout Long Island to highlight the best of what we got. And I want to have there's a fee to enter it, and I want to have a charitable part of it, and I think the charitable part of it should go directly to veterans on Long Island specifically, and you can raise millions of dollars, get the community involved, and feel like they're giving back. So these are very specific ideas that I have, and I've already started the discussion with some of the folks in Port Washington. Steve Ballone, the county executive, loves the idea, and I can't wait to come up with some new ideas to solve some old problems. Thanks.
Just lost my red card.
Next question, Mr. Haber.
I'll give it to you if you want.
Okay.
Property taxes are a popular subject for candidates. What role does a state senator play?
Well, there's several roles property taxes could be affected by the state senator. The number one role is the amount of money that comes from Albany to backfill the balance and budgets of the school districts to help mitigate the tax cap, which I support and want to make permanent. But you know, with a tax cap, the lesser of 2% or consumer price index, last couple of years it's been 0.3, 0.6. And the budgets are more than that sometimes. I mean, healthcare goes up 10% a year, so it's up to the state of New York to backfill that. That comes back to the question I brought up earlier: is why does New York have Long Island? Why does Long Island have 17% of the students and only 12% of the funding? And why do we keep giving money to New York City? And why do we for universal pre-K or for charter schools? I mean, these are the things that we're paying for. And one interesting point is in 2003, Long Island sent $2.9 billion more to Albany than we got back. It was a study by the Long Island Association. That most recent number was $4.7 billion. So your tax dollars, you know, in a Republican-dominated state Senate, and we're talking about balance again, keep going in a greater quantity away where we get drips and drabs back and funding to backfill our public schools. I'm a public school kid. My whole family's in public education. I'm on the school board. You can sure bet that I'm going to work my tail off to make sure that we get our fair share, and we're not doing that. And that fair share has been a talking point for a long time. They've had 50 years. I think it's time to give somebody else a shot.
So our fair share of education is a #1 priority because it is the bulk of our taxes here on Long Island. You know, we are very fortunate to have these excellent schools, but it is costing us a lot of money, and it is one of the reasons why people are leaving Long Island. So Mr. Haber is absolutely correct. We have 17% of the students, 12.7, 13% rounding up of our fair share of our education aid, and we have to continue to fight to make sure that we get our fair share of school taxes. Property tax cap, it has to be a law. There's a mechanism. There is a mechanism to override the property tax cap. It has saved Nassau County over $800 million of taxes. So we must make sure that the property tax cap becomes a law. Family tax credit, it's about to expire in December of this year. I propose that we continue the family tax credit, and why not double it? Let's make sure all families get the benefits on their taxes. Let's put in dependent child care or dependent care for seniors. I mean, this is a cost that costs young families anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 after tax. It's crazy how much child care costs. Why not offer a dependent care tax? Thank you.
Next question, Ms. Phillips, you will answer first. Will you accept or support donations from ALEC, American Legislative Executive Committee? Do you support ALEC's legislative agenda?
You know, I will be honest and say I am unaware of Alex. I will say, since I have a minute to talk, is that ethics reform is crucial in Albany, and as both my opponent and myself have brought up in our introductory speeches. And the fact is donations, whoever's donating to our campaign, we must make sure that there's transparency. So I apologize, I am unaware of this organization. However, I will say that transparency, I am not for, government-funded campaigns. With all due respect, Mr. Haber, I don't want to fund your campaign, and my guess is he doesn't want to fund my campaign either. So I am not for government-sponsored campaigns.
All right, Mr. Haber?
Yeah, I'll be candid also. I don't know what Alex is. So I'll use the same time to discuss.
Who asked it? I'm curious.
I'll use the same time to discuss corruption and how we're going to fix it in Albany, which is an age-old issue that's been going on for quite some time. Bipartisan issue. There's 5 points to what I think should happen. First, I believe in term limits. I think 12 years is plenty. There's people who've been there since the 70s. It's you got to get fresh blood in, fresh ideas. I think it's an important thing to sponsor. There's something called the LLC loophole. If you're an individual or a corporation, you can give $5,000, but if you're a rich individual or corporation, you can give unlimited amounts of money no matter how many LLCs you have. That's how laws get created for those who have wealth, and we've got to get money out of politics and stop that LLC loophole. We can not have employment by government officials that relates to the government service. You saw what happened with Skelos, you saw what happened with Silver. It happens all the time. You can't have lobbyists working as your state senators. I think there should be a bipartisan committee that decides whether or not your employment is germane to being a state senator, and if they agree, great. If not, you can't do it. I want to lower the donation threshold from $11,000 to $2,700. That's what the federal is. I don't know why the state's so high. And we absolutely got to get rid of the pensions of corrupt officials. It's already been passed once. We'll probably both vote on it a second time, but then you will vote on it. But the first 4 points I brought up, by the way, had been blocked by the state Senate Republicans. They had an opportunity during the tragedy of both recent corruptive episodes of our leaders of both the Senate and the Assembly. They missed that opportunity. It's not going to happen unless you get some new people in there. If you elect the same people, you're not getting any fix on the corruption whatsoever.
Mr. Haber, next question. As a businessman, and this was directed to you,
Sure.
would you assist the business community to incentivize people with mental health issues?
Well, my wife's a social worker, and she's in the audience somewhere. If I say anything else, I'm not going home tonight. Look, I have a nephew who's schizophrenic. Their family's struggling. It's extremely expensive, and we use our jails as places, repositories for the mentally ill, and nobody wants to talk about it. We're really hurting the least among us, and I think mental health funding and education and services for those who need it and struggle with it is an imperative. It's just not a business issue, it's a moral issue. The government can do a lot better job.
And I would agree with my opponent. I too have a sister with mental health. I had the privilege of meeting with the director of the JCC, which I believe you're on the board.
My wife is.
Your wife's on the board. And I will say I was so impressed with a portion, well, impressed with the entire facility. It was phenomenal. But they have a program there that takes children, young adults that are on the spectrum, and they teach them how to do laundry, how to work at a laundromat, or work at a dry cleaner. And so they give them a skill. They give them a real-life skill. There's a bakery up in Port Washington that makes sure that they hire people that are either on the spectrum or have some sort of mental health. Mental health, when I first started walking, so I've knocked on over 6,500 doors so far. Started out with high heels, now I wear flip-flops. But I will tell you, so many people brought up mental health to me, and I think it's one of these diseases, and your wife well knows. I have a daughter that's going to get a PhD in psychology, God, willing, this fall, and it's something that people are still afraid to talk about, and it is something that government needs to support.
The next question, Ms. Phillips, is directed to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Why should Democrats vote for you?
Right. Come on in. Well, first, let me repeat something that I said. The answer is, I am a firm believer in bipartisan government. And as a mayor, I appointed 4 of my 5 trustees with no knowledge of party affiliation. And a reporter asked me the other day what their party affiliation was, because they still didn't know 5 years later. I guess I appointed them through the last 5 years. And the fact is, none of the 4 were the same party. So why am I asking for your vote? I'm asking for your vote because I have a record. I don't just talk about cutting taxes. I don't just talk about ethics reform. I don't just talk about the environment. I have a record. I've actually accomplished these things. So that is why I am going to ask for all voters to look at my record, look through it, not what my opponent says, with all due respect, but look at the actual record, and I think you will like what you see. And then you make a decision on the balance of government. So thank you.
So can I answer that with a different twist? Why should Republicans vote for me? Is that fair enough?
Suppose so. We have to be fair to
Fair is
each
fair,
other.
right? Well, look, many of my friends say I have fiscal issues that sound like a Republican, and socially I'm a Democrat through and through. But for me, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm the guy that always signs the front of the checks, not the back of the checks. I was in the restaurant business for many years. I've employed hundreds of people. I know how hard it is to make payroll when things are going hard and bad. I came up with creative ideas in the Roslyn School Board that saved the generator over $10 million, shared them with school districts throughout the county, even lectured up in in Rochester about how to do that, and cooperated with other districts above and beyond that. But I have 4 things that I think will help our economy and lower our taxes, which is, I'm going to be very specific. First, I want to expand our largest employer in the area, healthcare. We employ 40,000 people in healthcare, and I believe that we could become the Mayo Clinic, a destination for people all over the world. These are good-paying jobs that will help expand our economy. Second, efficiency in government, which I touched on. Most politicians either raise taxes or they fire people. I think I know how to find plenty of things to save money, including expanding the bidding of contracts and transparency like I did on NIFA. Tourism, I touched base briefly on that. I think we have 60 million visitors a year that go to New York City. We've got great beaches. We've got great parks. There's so many ideas I have beyond the bike race that I brought up to expand our tax base through tourism, and that's a great way to raise sales tax revenue. And finally, the permitting process on Long Island is the worst in the country. It takes longer to get a housing permit here or build anything, and the quicker you get shovels in the ground. I'm a partner in a commercial real estate out in the West Coast. I know how that expands the economy better than anything else with good jobs, good union-paying jobs, which we so desperately need for a strong middle class here on Long Island.
Mr. Haber, this is your question first. If elected, will you support publicly funded elections?
Publicly funded elections. So you're saying matching funds?
I read the question just as it was written.
Okay. If elected, I will support publicly funded elections. I think it's the best way to have the average person, a garbage man, a school teacher, a custodian, should be able to run for office, not just wealthy people who are financed by big corporations and who can finance their own candidacies. Getting money out of politics, that's the best way to do it. And I believe in preventative, not reactive medicine, right? We have so much money that's wasted through corruption now. And if you save money with Dean Skelos, never would have had an AppTech contract, essentially, if it was a publicly funded election, because he wouldn't have worried about getting those donations to feed himself, as Skelos did, as everybody else did, as Silver did, and sell their souls to the highest bidder. It's an investment. It works in New York City, where you're basically represented by your peers, and now you're not. And I think that's an investment. And if you look at the dollar to dollar, what it costs to publicly fund elections versus how much is saved in corruptions, I'm an investment guy. It's a clear choice. I know the sound bites that I don't want to invest in my campaign, or Elaine doesn't want to, I don't want to invest in Elaine's campaign and she doesn't invest in mine, sounds good. But the reality is, in the end, it saves a lot more money. An ounce of prevention is better than a pound to cure. You could look at that with the environment, trying to keep toxins out of our environment versus spending $100 million on fixing up a plume like it's happening right now in Bethpage. If you keep our water supply clean and invest early, you'll save money in the long run. If you invest in people now, you won't have corruption in politics, and it won't cost more money in the long run. So I want to be specific and not talk about sound bites. That I think it's a great way to go.
So I've answered the question. I am absolutely against government-funded campaigns. That is just not a business that I think the government should get into. The government's in enough businesses. It doesn't need to get into campaign financing. And I don't believe with the government involved in campaigns, it will help corruption at all. If anything, I would argue that it could actually increase corruption in campaigns. But I'd also like to go back to one question, since I have a second here, and Adam mentioned permits. Permits on Long Island. Permits are a local government or town process. It's not a Long Island process. And the fact is, if you come to the village of Flower Hill, you're going to get your permit in a professional, friendly, and timely way. And I see some other mayors out here, out in this audience today, and I'm going to stand up for them too and say, let village government, let local government do our business, keep Albany out of our business, keep the federal government out of our business, and you will have more efficiency.
All right, I'm going to put my red card up for my second.
Red cards. Oh, here
right
it
there.
is. I got it. Thanks.
So I believe in local control. I want the local mayors to continue to be able to go through the permitting process. The problem is it's Byzantine. What happens in Flower Hill versus Roslyn versus North Hempstead, it's very hard for developers to know all the rules. I'd like to standardize the rules and have the onus on government, instead of the onus on the person, fulfill those rules. You can have a meeting and someone could show up and cancel it. It just slows down the process. We have the slowest permitting process in all of the country. I'll give you a quick story. My cousin wanted to open up an animal hospital, and he couldn't do that because it took 12 months to get a permit, and he couldn't rent a place to get a facility because he couldn't get the permit, and he couldn't go through the process to get the legal ability to do that. So it's a chicken and the egg thing. And if you standardize the process for all businesses, they know what to expect. They know that you can get things done in a timely manner, and every village retains the right to reject a permit if they choose, and you get more shovels in the ground quicker. That's how you expand the economy. That's how you lower the tax base, widen the tax base, and lower your taxes. But there's too many government entities, 10,000 in New York State, who all have their own rules. They should be standardized.
This will be your final question, and Mr. Haber will answer first. What is the first thing that you want to fix when you wake up every day?
And don't mention your wife.
The first thing I want to fix when I wake up every day, I have a lot of energy. I only know one speed, which is go, and that's the same energy I'll bring to the state senate when I'm there. I've been in the real estate business. I've been in the restaurant business. I just sold them in August, so I'd have full-time energy to do this. I've been in commodity trading. I've created hundreds of jobs my whole life. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been in startup companies. For me, the government is a $154 billion business that's inefficient. It's wasting our money. People are leaving here. And for me, I wake up every morning wanting to help people to change their lives for the better. And whether that's through progressive issues like making sure that women have the right to choose, which I want to codify in New York state law, which is very important, or it's to make sure that gay people have the right to marry, or whether it's to make sure that you can get a permit quicker. My job is to hopefully leave this world a better place than I found it, and I really get joy out of giving back. So when I wake up every morning, I can't wait it's like Carpe Diem, seize the day. And that's how I will take the same attitude to state government and work for you, not for anybody else.
So when I wake up in the morning and I get the opportunity, the last couple months it hasn't been the case, but I get to walk my dog. And my dog and I walk down to the Flower Hill Park, a beautiful space that back in 2007, the former mayor was smart enough to take over from Nassau County. And under my leadership, my executive leadership in the village of Flower Hill, I've turned in from a passive park to an active park. We have children, we have a basketball court, we have this beautiful playground. And then I go into the village hall. And as the executive of the village of Flower Hill, I want to make sure that people aren't waiting months for their permits. And as I said, I guarantee you in the village of Flower Hill, people aren't waiting months for their permits. We have taken Northern Boulevard, which is our commercial area. It's been literally turned over in the last couple years with new businesses because guess what? We work with the community. We work with the developer, but we also work with our residents to make sure that both sides, their concerns and the issues are satisfied. So what do I want to do when I wake up in the morning? Kind of the same thing. I care. I want to make sure that we leave this earth in a better place, and I want to make sure that my constituents are well taken care of.
And now we are ready for your closing statements. Wasn't that a wonderful segue into this? Mr. Haber, and then Ms. Phillips for your closing statements.
Thank you very much. I have a closing statement. Before we get there, I wish we had more time because we didn't talk about seniors at length and how much they need help from protecting them from scams or the prescription drug medications being too expensive. These are things you could do in the state. We didn't get to talk about the environment, which I care about passionately and have helped continually. And I've been endorsed by the Long Island Environmental Voters Forum. I'm very proud of that. There's much more we could have talked about, but I'll just finish on this positive note. I just want to thank you all for attending this forum and for everyone involved in organizing this event. And I can't think of a more important part of the political process than public debate and discussion on the issues that matter to all of us. We all love Long Island. That's why we're here in this room on this October evening. We're here because we want to protect the quality of life we all work so hard to achieve, and because we want to strive to leave things a little bit better than we found them, like we just discussed. That means reducing the tax burden. It means protecting our environment. It means keeping schools strong and our kids educated on the dangers and traps of substance abuse and opioid addiction, which you didn't even get to talk about. It means taking on the corruption crisis head on. I'm running for office because I believe that together we can make a difference in these issues, and I'm proud of the work that I've done on behalf of the community and my dedication to causes ranging from empowering at-risk youth to protecting our groundwater and helping families recover from the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, and I'm hoping that doesn't have to happen again very soon. I believe my experience on the Roslyn School Board and on NIFA have taught me lessons on how to run a better, more responsive government, and I'd like to bring what I've learned to Albany. Can't thank my wife, Renee, enough, and my family for encouraging me to get involved and run for the school board 8 years ago. We've done great things. We've seen real results. I found my passion in public service, and I will always, always put Long Island first. Please do me the honor of casting your vote on my behalf. If I have the good fortune to be elected, I will never forget that I work for you, and I will tirelessly advocate for our community. Thank you so much.
Yes. I want to thank the League of Women's Voters for hosting tonight, and thank you all for coming. Some people wonder if their vote really counts. Well, in this election, it certainly will. Your one vote could mean the difference between balance in Albany and a one-party government that hands control to New York City. Here on Long Island, we just have to look at the past history to know the risks. Higher taxes. With one-party government controlled by New York City, we got $14 billion in new spending and $14 billion in new taxes. With one-party government controlled by New York City, we got less funding for our top-notch schools, $124 million over a period of time, and lost aid to this district alone. With one-party government controlled by New York City, we got fewer investments in infrastructure like roads, water, and sewer. One-party government controlled by New York City gave us the MTA payroll tax, which costs Long Island $200 million a year. One-party government controlled by New York City gave us no voice. No voice for Long Island. Why would we want to go back to that? In the Senate, I will stand up to the New York City politicians and fight for Long Island's interests. I'll fight for our fair share for schools. I will fight for taxes. I did it as a mayor, and I know how to do it in Albany. I will work to cut the red tape on small businesses and help create jobs. I will fight for a better environment, cleaner air in harbors, and pure drinking water. It's a fight I've proudly led as a mayor, and I will continue to lead in the Senate. I'm so grateful to be able to call Long Island my home. It's where Andy and I raised our 3 daughters, and it's where I want them to stay and raise their own families, my grandchildren. That's the same wish I have for each and every one of you here tonight. If you honor me with your vote, I promise that I will work just as hard as all of you do to create a better future for Long Island. Thank you.
Now, let's give them a rousing applause. For this session, we will have a debate between the candidates for the 16th New York State Assembly District, formerly Michelle Schimmel's district. And the first candidate to make an opening statement is Mr. Anthony Durso.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Durso.
Ready to go?
Ready.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Anthony Durso, and I'm running for the 16th Assembly Districts for New York State. I wanted to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this debate, this forum, however you want to call it. And I want to thank every one of you for being here and for being so attentive to the first part of the debate, and I hope you'll be just as attentive for the second one. I'm running for the State Assembly because I was able to achieve the American dream. And I want to make sure that the future generations could do just as well. I came to America when I was 21 years old. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and an 8th grade education. I found jobs washing dishes, furniture making, and bricklaying. I worked full-time to support my family. And while going to school for 16 years at nighttime, I had to learn English, get my high school diploma, an associated degree, a Bachelor of Science, and a Master of Science degree from Pratt Institute School of Architecture. I worked for New York City Department of Housing and became the Assistant Commissioner of the Division of Architecture, Engineering, and Construction. I managed a staff of 300 employees. I oversaw the design and construction of thousands of housing units and managed a staff of 300, as I said, and a capital annual budget of $300 million. After leaving my position with the city, I was elected councilman at large for the town of North Hempstead. I served 4 consecutive terms. I saved taxpayers' money by revising the procurement policies, reducing the number of contracts sourced out, and by doing more work in-house with our own town staff. I also voted to cut my own salary by 25% for 10 years. I worked to improve town parks and playgrounds, build new soccer fields, and as an animal advocate, oh, Madonna mia, I'm running late. I advocate the tree protection legislation, and in the last 10 years, I made 36 trips to Africa, Haiti, and Central America doing humanitarian work. I took a lead of building numerous schools because of my background. I built orphanages, medical clinics, and little house for the homeless. In Nairobi, Kenya alone, today, we provide shelter, we feed, we clothe, we provide education, and we provide medical care to 1,200 children. Over the years, I've been an active member of many organizations, civics, ethnic, fraternal, and religious. I've lived my life by a certain set of principles centered on family, education, ethics, and hard work. These principles have helped me to achieve the American dream, and I'm eager to put these principles to work in Albany. Thank you. Sorry I abused the time a little bit.
Yes, yes.
But you liked it, though. I mean, okay. I appreciate that.
What do you want to do with it? All right, Mr. Varvaro.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum, and thank you all for coming out. My name is Matt Varvaro. I'm running for the State Assembly here. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm from Port Washington. I was born and raised there. I went to college at Johns Hopkins University, and after that, I came back here to New York, where I've been working in state politics and government ever since. I worked as an aide to Councilwoman Dina DiGiorgio at the town of North Hempstead, my councilwoman, and last year I worked as the research director on Governor George Pataki's campaign for President of the United States. You may or may not have heard, but Governor Pataki did not win the Republican primary, so here I am. But so the reason I'm running for the State Assembly is because I care about my community very much, and when I see the level of corruption in Albany and the flat-out bad policies that I think are holding this state back, it deeply frustrates me, and I'd like to do something about it and be part of the solution. So, my number one priority in this campaign, and my number one priority when I get to Albany, will be enacting comprehensive ethics reform. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sick and tired of opening up the newspaper every day and reading another story about another politician in Albany who's been convicted of corruption or some other breach of the public's trust. You know, I try to avoid making overstatements, but I think the state of corruption in Albany is an absolute disgrace, and I think that needs to end, and it needs to end now. So again, I'm going to make it my mission to pass comprehensive ethics reform. That includes things like term limits, a strong ethics board with teeth, more government transparency, tougher penalties for corrupt politicians, and finally, an overhaul of the broken process whereby state contracts and grants always seem to end up in the hands of campaign contributors, which, if you've been reading the news lately, you see is a major issue. I also have other priorities, like reforming our tax and regulatory code so that we can grow the economy and create jobs and lower the cost of living and doing business here on Long Island. I'd like to reform our education system so that we can bring our public schools into the 21st century and make sure that our students are getting the high-quality education that they deserve. And then finally, you know, I'd like to do everything in my power to protect the environment and natural resources and waterways that we've been blessed with on the North Shore of Long Island. So, you know, I think if we can do those things, if we can fundamentally change our approach to ethics and the economy, education, the environment, we could do so much good for our community and so much good for the people of this state. So I would ask you that, you know, if you're sick and tired of the status quo in Albany and you'd like to elect an assembly person who is truly committed to reform with every fiber of his being, I hope you'll join our campaign. There's a lot of work to be done to turn this thing around, and I'm excited to get to work. So thank you all again for having me, and I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Durso, you will answer the first question first. All right?
I'm with you.
All right. What experience would you draw from to improve ethics and end corruption in Albany?
Good question. I'll give you a little bit of how I helped to cut down the taxes for some of the reforms I've done while I was a councilman. But I want to carry that a little bit further. When I was Assistant Commissioner of Architecture, Engineering, and Construction, with a big staff and $300 million of capital funds for a year, and I picked up my employees very gentle, like tomatoes, no bruises. And I posed myself as a role model. I am really obsessed with honesty, integrity, and high standard values. In the almost 30 years that I was the assistant commissioner, spent in taxpayers' time a big way. Nobody under my supervision ever got caught taking graft. So the night that I was, given up on that job and go away, the commissioner came to see me and says, "Tony, what has been your biggest accomplishment? You've been spending taxpayers' money for a long way. What's your biggest accomplishment?" I said, the fact that we design and build the three, okay. It's not an accomplishment. I got to pay to do that job. And my biggest accomplishment that I kept an honest office and nobody ever got caught for corruption. I want to bring the same qualities, the same determination to this New York State Legislature.
Mr. Varvaro.
Thank
All right,
you.
well, thanks for the question. And yeah, as I said, ethics is the centerpiece of my campaign. So I know we only have 90 seconds, but let me tell you very quickly about what I plan to do when I get to Albany. Number one, I strongly support term limits. Over the last 5 years, more politicians in Albany have lost their jobs due to ethical and legal reasons than have lost their jobs because they've been voted out of office. To me, that's as good an argument as I've ever heard for term limits and the need to put some strong institutional changes in place to ensure that we're sending fresh blood to Albany every year. Number two, I support tougher penalties for politicians who have been convicted of corruption. The idea that you can be convicted of a corruption as an elected official, you can be found to have basically bilked the taxpayers out of money and treated them as your own personal ATM, then get thrown out of office, and then collect a $90,000 a year taxpayer-funded pension, to me defies common sense. So that needs to change. And by the way, if you're found guilty of corruption, I think that you, rather than the taxpayers, should be forced to pay for your own legal bills. Again, that strikes me as common sense. I think that we need to overhaul again, like I said, the broken contracting and grant system, whereby contracts and grants always seem to end up in the hands of campaign contributors. So the way I would do that is I would outsource that process to an independent third-party commission made up of industry experts appointed on a bipartisan basis, and remove that process as far away as humanly possible from the political process and the legislature. And then finally, very quickly, I support a strong ethics board with teeth. We have 2 very weak ethics boards in Albany that are not getting the job done, that have been bystanders to corruption over the last few years. I would roll that into a strong, independent, effective oversight board with real teeth and discretion and authority to investigate elected officials.
Next question, and you will speak first, Mr. Varvaro.
Okay.
What is your position on the Common Core curriculum?
Sure. Well,
Do
that's-
you support a parent's right to refuse state testing?
Sure. Well, it's obviously a very important question that's been affecting our district and the students and parents here. Look, the rollout of Common Core was absolutely atrocious. I don't think there's any question about that. There was very little communication between the federal government and the state government, between the state government and parents, students, teachers, in terms of what was being expected under these new standards. So I support many of the reforms that the state has been putting in place in recent years. For example, making the implementation slower and more manageable. The state has started releasing test questions. I think that's a good first step. We should be releasing all test questions from the previous year so that students and teachers, again, know what kind of questions they're being expected to answer. Finally, I think we need more input from teachers so that we can rely on their expertise to really ensure that the test questions are age appropriate, which has been a very, very serious problem. But look, let me just say this. I support high education standards. I think it's important that we measure student performance so that we know which students are doing well, and more importantly, so that we know which students are not doing well, so that we can get them the support and the resources they need to learn the material that they're going to need to succeed in this economy. So that's my position on Common Core. In terms of parents' right to refuse testing, sure, of course they have that right. I don't think anyone's saying that anyone should be thrown in jail or be hit with financial penalties for refusing to take a state test. But I will say that I believe that the answer is to reform the standards rather than, throwing standards out the window and telling people that, encouraging people not to take standardized tests.
I'm just going to interrupt for a moment. I read the procedures when we began. Perhaps you gentlemen were not here, and you have a minute and a half to answer your questions. But you're doing very well.
Thank you. I like the positive reinforcement.
All right, Mr. Durso,
Thank you.
do you remember his question now?
Yes.
Common Core.
Common Core. Everybody agrees that the original rollout was a disaster. And that's why a high percentage of the students, opted out. Although we have a beautiful, beautiful school districts here that produce the highest graduating rate in the high 90s, and the same high graduating students go to the best college throughout the United States. And probably if you leave the education in the hands of the local school boards with some sort of coordination by the state, probably could get it just as good results, if not better, without the Common Core. But you need a standards to, set a level playing field. So now the Common Core is out of the public attention right now because the governor is trying to revamp the Common Core test now with the involvement of the community, the school boards, the superintendents of schools, the parents, and so on and so forth. It's going to be rolled out if all these different factions, agree to the new test. but in the school year of 2019-2020.
Very good.
Did I meet the threshold?
You did.
Making me look bad.
All right. Now, we move on to the next question. Mr. Durso. Politicians always seem to vote with their party. Would you stand alone and vote with the other party if it was the correct thing to do for your constituents?
I say never, but they could be. I say could be because I usually vote for the party line because I live in a community where I have many, many good friends that are Democrats, and they have served on one capacity or another in so many different ways, like May Newberg, like Tom DiNapoli, like Michelle Schimmel. How could I vote for another that is equal as good when a member of my own party is good? So very rarely I vote for a candidate from another party.
Okay, so I think this is a fundamental difference. I think if you vote for me, you are not going to vote for someone who consistently toes the party line. I think I'm a very independent-minded thinker, and there are many issues on which I'll be able to work with Democrats, which frankly, as a Republican in the state assembly, you need to do in order to accomplish things. And I'll just list some of the issues. Criminal justice reform. I think this state locks up far too many people for low-level, nonviolent offenses, people who frankly should not be in prison and who would be much better much better served through treatment and rehabilitation programs, which I think are far more effective and far less expensive than incarceration. I support what's known as raise the age, which would raise the age of criminal responsibility to 18, which would put us in line with basically every other state in the country, and which would stop treating young children like hardened criminals. I support LGBT rights. You know, I support marriage equality. I support extending non-discrimination protections to LGBT New Yorkers. I think that's very important. And one last issue is immigration. I firmly believe that New York State should be welcoming to immigrants. I think it always has been. That's been in our history. That's why I support legislation like the DREAM Act, which would extend in-state tuition benefits to students who were brought here illegally as children. Because frankly, I don't think we should be punishing children for the actions of their parents. And I think that once these children are in our country, we should be doing everything in our power to help them achieve the American dream and to give them the education and the skills that they need to succeed in this economy. So that's going to be a major part of my approach when I get to Albany. Again, there are many issues on which I look forward to working across the aisle.
Mr. Varvaro, are you for or against allowing candidates to run on more than one ballot line? Why?
Sure. I mean, I think that's the law right now. I think each of us are running on multiple party lines. I don't see anything wrong with it. I think it's totally consistent with election law. I don't think that's really been a source of corruption or political malfeasance. So yeah, I would support that.
Mr. Durso?
Doesn't that resemble a little bit the question, would you vote for another
Yes, it
party
does.
candidates?
Yes, it does.
Well, I think that because we live in a society where it would tolerate multiple parties beside the two major parties, it is good that the other minor parties could get their message, their voice to the electors. And many times it's not their choice not to field their own candidates. So they interview the contestants, the candidates for specific offices, and according to what they like to hear or what we say, they decide who to support. We don't just go and knock down the doors to get their support. We are usually invited to go for a screening to see if they could support, candidates from the major party and from, the support from the minor parties. I don't see anything wrong with that.
Mr. Durso this question. Oops, thanks, I was gonna get it, all right, thank you. This is a long question. The Assembly failed to vote this past year on the anti-boycott bill to stop anti-Israel boycotts. Jack Martins sponsored the anti-boycott bill in the state Senate, and the bill passed in the Senate. Will you commit to sponsoring and voting for the same good anti-boycott bill in the Assembly in 2017?
Wait, first of all, is the Assembly duty and obligation to vote for an international boycott? I don't know. Is it? Neither do I. So I don't know too much about this bill. I do not know too much of the legality of this bill. I would certainly get as much information as I can, and I invite the person that asked this question to meet after this debate, maybe after a day or so that I gather all the information, and I'll be in a better position to answer that question. Thank you.
Right. So the bill that they're referring to is the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions Bill against the State of Israel. Senator Martins introduced legislation that would defund any organization that is engaging in this movement, which is basically a boycott of any Israeli goods and services. I strongly support that legislation. I think, Israel is a tremendous ally. I think it's a beacon of democracy and modernity in the Middle East, and any effort to boycott or sanction the Israeli government or Israeli goods, I think is totally contrary to our values as New Yorkers, and it doesn't deserve the dignity of taxpayer support. So I strongly support the legislation. I would be thrilled to introduce it in the Assembly. And by the way, it's an important point because the legislation passed the state Senate, but it got stalled in the Assembly, which is why I think it's important to send people to the Assembly, who prioritize this bill, who are aware of what the bill is, and who are willing to really take the lead on it and try to get it signed into law. So, yeah, absolutely.
All right, Mr. Varvaro, the next question. Do you believe heroin is a problem? And what steps have already been taken to address it? And what steps will you take to address it?
The heroin epidemic is an extremely serious problem in our district and our community. And, you hear people say things like, well, it's a terrible problem, you read about it in the newspaper, but it would never happen here. Well, it is happening here. It's happening in our community. It's happening every single day. I know several people who I went to school with who are now dead because of a heroin overdose. And these were not bad people. They were good people from good families who did not live to see the age of 25 because they fell victim to addiction. Last year in Nassau County alone, there were 58 fatal heroin overdoses. That's more than one a week. So it's an extremely serious issue, and there's a lot that we can do to tackle it. Number one, we have to crack down on doctor shopping, which is where patients buy prescription pills from multiple doctors and multiple pharmacists. So I support what's known as lock-in, where you lock in each patient to one doctor and one pharmacist to buy these highly addictive opioids. Number two, I think that we should limit the amount of pills and the length of prescription that when doctors prescribe these pills. So in other words, doctors can't say, here's a bunch of pills, we'll see you in a month. On the law enforcement side of things, I think that we need to divert our law enforcement resources from lower-level drugs like marijuana, frankly, toward harder drugs like heroin, crack down on these drug dealers, throw them behind bars, and get these drugs off the streets. And finally, very quickly, we need to be expanding our treatment and rehabilitation programs in New York State to make sure that those who are addicted are getting the treatment services that they need to turn their lives around.
Mr. Durso?
Yeah, I agree with most of what Matt said. However, the approach might be a little different. First of all, we have to have an educational program to see as we can, educate the people the danger of heroin, and it might take a little longer to do it, but we want to make sure that the prospective user of these drugs, dangerous drugs, know what they're getting into, and that could be the dead end, and they should not do it, and hope that you keep drumming into their heads through education, we probably understand. So reduce the consumption of these dangerous drugs. The other one is that we wanted to find out, besides doctor shopping and get the prescription from a multiple number of doctors, we also want to identify who's trafficking these drugs. They don't get to the neighborhood by someone in a mom and pop store. We wanted to know who are the people that are importing these drugs into the neighborhood and deal with them accordingly under the highest penalty of the law. So both of these methods of cracking down, we could probably diminish. I don't know if we ever root out the drug abuser, but you could substantially reduce the number of drug abusers.
Mr. Durso, do you think enough is being done to keep our students' personally identifiable data protected?
I don't think so, but I have an idea that the identifiable students' data should be protected by the local school districts. They should be, responsible to maintain that data and make sure that does not fall in the hands of people that may use for marketing purposes. So I fully support local control and keeping the data within the school districts. Also, the legislature needs to work together with a chief, what you call a privacy officer from the Department of Education to make sure that do not release that kind of information to anyone that, for whatever reason, might want to access it.
Mr. Varvaro.
Sure, and I think this issue ties into the reforms we need to make to Common Core, because increasingly our state is working with private organizations to write these tests and to implement the tests, and we're not putting in place the kind of safeguards that we need to ensure that those test companies are keeping student information private and anonymous. So I think it's vital that before before the state goes into business with a company, that they put clear, clear parts of the contract, clear language in the contract to ensure that this information is being kept confidential, it's not being released, and we're not doing that today. And it's one of the aspects of Common Core that has gone so wrong, and that I think we need to seriously, seriously reform.
Mr. Varvaro, this will be your next question, and it is long. There are 5,000 women and men in solitary confinement in New York State. More than 15 days in solitary confinement is considered torture by the UN. The Halt Solitary Confinement Act will limit its solitary to 15 days. If elected, will you support the Halt Solitary Confinement Bill?
Yes, I would. I think solitary confinement is overused. I think it gets to the point, as the question alluded to, where it becomes inhumane. And it's really part of an overall criminal justice approach and reform of our criminal justice system that I completely support and I'm going to be pushing for strongly when I get to the Assembly. So it's reforming solitary confinement. Again, it's making sure that we're not treating 15 and 16-year-old children as hardened criminals and segregating them into the juvenile justice system, which we are not doing today. And I think there are major humanitarian issues in doing that. I support a prison education program. If you look at the education programs that have been funded in this state and in other states, by giving inmates the skills and the education that they need to turn their lives around and succeed in this economy, you do so much good for the state, you do good for the taxpayers, and you do good for these individuals who really can become productive members of society. I think that, like I alluded to before, we are throwing way too many low-level, nonviolent offenders into prison. Right now, we have 3,000 individuals in state prisons who are in there for drug possession. Not being drug dealers, not for drug distribution, but drug possession. And basically the crime of being addicted to drugs. I think they're much better served by treatment and rehabilitation and programs like that, making investments in these individuals so that we can help them turn their lives around and become productive members of society.
Mr. Durso.
Yeah, I also look at it but from the unhuman point of view, especially when it is written into the Constitution of the UN. I think that's non-human. I will not tolerate it. I would also try to have education program to make sure that the young abusers, the young offenders, don't get the same treatment as the adults. And I also would go one step further, bring those resources vis-a-vis law enforcement to a more egregious infractions of the law and try to abolish this infamous Rockefeller laws where some people get 20 years in jail for possessing a certain amount of marijuana so that we could have more resources to deal with the major law offenders and that commit more criminal acts.
Now, Mr. Durso again. What experiences will help you fulfill your duties in assembly?
My duty.
Yes.
It's my past experience. I've done it before. I've been serving the public in so many different ways, whether it was in the administrative end of government or in the legislative end of government, under very strict, high standards, ethical and moral laws. I will take that with me. I've done it before. I will do it again. Just to give an example, I think I touched upon before, all my life I've been guided by high ethics standards. I did mention that when I was in a city, nobody got arrested because I emphasized that. And so I'll bring many years of experience with me to Albany to better serve the people, not through promises, oh, I will do this, I will do that. I've served the people. I think I did a very good job. People elected me 4 times before, and I bring the same quality, the same stamina, the same tenacity, persistency to make sure that we'll serve the people right.
Mr. Varvaro?
Sure. Well, I've been working in politics and government in some capacity for the last 7 years of my life. I served in a policy and research role on a campaign for President of the United States. I served the constituents of the town of North Hempstead when I was working in the councilwoman's office. And I think a lot of these jobs have given me, the skills and experience I would need to be an effective member of the Assembly. I feel very confident about that, or else I wouldn't be running for the seat. But I think most importantly, the most important assets that an assembly person can have are good judgment, conviction, knowing where you stand on the issues, having knowledge of the issues, knowing what your goals and priorities are. And I think that's something I certainly bring to the table. And I guess the last point I would make is when it comes to Albany politics, I think that the best thing that you can do is send someone there who's not part of the system, who's not a career politician, who's willing to bring new and fresh ideas to the table, who's willing to bring a bipartisan approach, an independent approach. And again, if you elect me, that's the kind of assembly person you're going to be getting.
Mr. Varvaro, if elected, will you support publicly funded elections?
No, I will not. I have a few problems with publicly funded elections. Number one, if you have a philosophical objection to both candidates, if you don't intend on voting, I don't really understand why your taxpayer dollars should be spent to fund politicians' campaigns. I think my other problem with that is that too often public financing systems are used as tools by, frankly, incumbent politicians to keep out rival challengers. In many of these elections, one of the only ways that challengers and upstart candidates can get their name out there and build up name recognition is by, frankly, spending money and getting their name out there and advertising. So I think it's well-intentioned. People who support public financing have good intentions. They want to do the right thing, but I just think it's the wrong way to go about doing that. And I think it actually has, the costs of the program outweigh the benefits, so it's not something that I support.
Yeah, I hear that everybody is reached a breaking point to tolerate all the malfeasance of the corruptions that has taken place in Albany. As it was mentioned before, one day doesn't go by where someone else is get arrested. So, and everybody has different ideas. There are a few different ideas on the table. One is to partially or in total eliminate outside source of income. I agree that to a point, because in all honesty, you cannot serve two masters. You either concentrate and do the job at the legislature for the people of the state, or serve the other one. When you mix the two, because I'm pretty sure that in some cases, if not in many cases, the sources of outside income creates an obligation from the people that are hiring the legislator. So he's going to favor, the outside income principles more than he does his job. Now, my approach is difficult but simple. Take money out of politics. I think just prohibiting, and institute term limits, it doesn't work. We have term limits. It's called elections. So I would take money out of politics, and I would make the full-time legislature with an adequate salary. And by that, at the beginning, it looks like it's a lot of money to public finance the election, but when it's all said and done, with all the waste that you eliminated, the corruption that you eliminated, because it takes more money to run a government under the existing system than it would if you have a legislator that is not tied up to any, what you call self-interest, and that will do, the job without that weight on his back to think about who I'm going to offend now if I do this or if I do that. But because of the election paid by the government, I think will save more money than we spend now to run a government.
Mr. Varvaro wishes to rebut.
Thank you. I feel like a soccer referee with these red cards. Well, I just wanted to add something that I hadn't mentioned before. I do support campaign finance reforms. So something I support is, that's gotten a lot of attention, is eliminating the LLC loophole, which enables individuals to basically funnel money through these LLCs and not appear on financial disclosure forms. I think that's a pretty common sense reform that we can make to our campaign finance system. It's something that I strongly support. In terms of raising legislators' salaries, I don't know if you've seen this in the newspaper, but there's now an effort in Albany to give legislators a 47% pay raise, which to me is just mind-boggling. I mean, with elected officials going to prison, the legislature's complete failure to pass any meaningful ethics reform, and now they're on the verge of getting a 47% pay increase, again, just boggles the mind. So it's something that I completely oppose.
Mr. Durso,
Yeah, I would like to, yeah, I'm sorry.
you would like to,
We'll respond also.
yes, go right ahead.
All right. Why go out of the way and try to have this election reforms when it's more difficult to follow through the method you propose than it would be easier to do it to a real reform by having public-funded election? You do not public fund the election of every Dick and Harry that wants to go to the legislature. There have to be the proper guidelines when a candidate qualifies to get that campaign public finance money. So that's why I think take the money out of politics, make it a full-time legislature, give a livable, salary, and we would eliminate the temptation by the elected official to satisfy the special interest groups.
All right, Mr. Durso, this question. I'm reading it just as it is written. What is the most problem you want to fix in Long Island?
Fix the problem in Long Island?
What is the greatest problem that you think?
Well, everybody talks about high school tax, property taxes, and everybody that's running for office, it's nothing new this year. The first thing says, I'll cut your taxes. I don't know, it's a good mantra, but I've never seen done after they get elected what kind of taxes they cut. So, how do you cut taxes? Well, it's a difficult commitment to make. I don't make it lightly. I never promise something that I'm not quite sure if I could deliver it, because you have to reach across the table, work with Democrats, Republicans, the Senate, the Assembly. And sometimes there's really a resistance, a very difficult. So some people make that promise because they know it's not going to happen. It's not their fault, and they make it to get some votes. I'm not that type of person. How do you cut the taxes? Well, first of all, we talked about tonight about the percentage of the students in the state account. 17% come from Long Island. We only get 12% of the student aid, to education. Now, if you close that gap, there's a lot of money that you could save there, and you could apply that to the tax rate, property tax rate. It could bring down the tax substantially. But it's another job to do that. And I think if we could get all the parties together, we could do that. And the other one is $157 billion of budget. Take a look at the health. It's 37% of the budget, and most of it goes to Medicaid. I don't want to cut service for Medicaid patients, but I want to cut the waste, the inefficiency, the corrupt methods for which that program is run. And again, we could save a lot of money.
We must stop now, Mr. Durso. All right. Time. I'm sorry. Now, Mr. Varvaro.
Okay, sure. So, ethics has been my number one priority, but another very important issue to me is education reform. We live in a 21st century information economy where the number one most important asset that an individual can have in this economy is a high-quality education. Now, look, I'm a product of Port Washington Public Schools. I got a great education. But I think that given the quality of parents and teachers and students in our community, there's no reason why Long Island schools shouldn't be the best on the planet. I mean, not just the best in the state, not the best in the country. Our goal should be to make schools on Long Island the best in the world. And there are a few ways that I would propose doing that. I mean, number one, I'm a big believer in technology in the classroom. I think that technological innovation has transformed virtually every other sector of the economy, and those revolutions haven't caught up to our education system. Students in this day and age don't just learn by sitting in a classroom and being lectured at. They learn by interacting with their iPads and their computers and their iPhones. So I would support education reforms that fund more technology in the classroom and incorporate technology into the curricula so that it's a part of the way students learn on a day-to-day basis. That's very important to me. I also support, very quickly, common sense, what I would consider common sense tenure and compensation reform, so that we're ensuring that we have the best teachers in the classroom at all times, which I think should be the goal of our public education system.
This will be the last question of the evening. It is directed to you, Mr. Varvaro, but I'm sure Mr. Durso would like to answer it. Who are you voting for in the presidential election?
Let me clarify one thing. The question was
It's Mr. Varvaro's
question.
Right.
But you said you want me to answer it.
After he
Oh,
does.
after it's done. Okay.
I'm shocked that it's taken this long to talk about Donald Trump. I mean, it's amazing. We've been here for like 3 hours, and this is the first time it's coming up. Look, I'll be honest, I have very serious problems with both parties' nominees for president. I just think based on some of the frankly bizarre and offensive comments that he's made, I have serious questions over whether Donald Trump has the temperament or the judgment to be commander-in-chief of the United States, and I just can't support him in good conscience. On the other hand, I have serious reservations about Secretary Clinton's, ethical conduct as Secretary of State, where, it's pretty clear that she, compromised American national security information in order to avoid freedom of information laws. And given that I'm running on an ethics platform, that's very, very concerning to me. Not to mention the significant policy disagreements I have with both candidates. With Mr. Trump on issues like immigration and trade, with Secretary Clinton on things like taxes and spending. So in this election, I'm going to do something that I've never done before, which is to leave the top of the ticket blank and just vote for our local candidates. I know. I mean, look, it's not something I'm happy to do. It's not something I'm very happy about, but I'm a Republican, but I'm an American first, so I think that's the right thing to do.
I have no problem stating I'm voting for Hillary Clinton. And why do I do that and I don't feel a bit of guilt? Because she's the most qualified candidate that we have that was being battle tested. He's done everything in the Senate. She's done everything in the Senate. As a Secretary of State, yeah, there's a lot of things to the contrary by the opposing party, the Benghazi, the this is that. When you compare that to the other candidates, it pales by comparison. So I know that comes Inauguration Day, Hillary Clinton will start running and perform the duty honorably of the President of the United States.
Yeah, so I just want to say very quickly, as interesting as the presidential debate is, this assembly race is not about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. It's about the two people sitting on stage right now. So I've made it a point to reach out to every voter in this district, whether they're voting for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump or none of the above, because frankly, I'd like to represent all of them when I get to Albany. And I think that the issues I'm running on, good government, ethics reform, cleaning up Albany, are not particularly partisan issues. And I think that anyone would be able to get behind those issues, regardless of who you support for president. So that's my approach.
Can I rebut? I just want to say that it's not unique that Matt is running for every vote he could get from different parties. We're doing that also. We're taking nothing for granted. We're going to work for every vote we could get. So I join you on that principle, and I agree with you. But although we might be using different techniques, it comes down to the same thing. Reach out to the other parties also, and try to get all the votes that you can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, before the candidates deliver their closing statements, I would like all of us to thank Marion Fleming for being an outstanding moderator and helping the evening run really smoothly. And a round of applause for very patient and focused Marie Bellon, our timer.
Thank you, thank you. And now we will hear the closing statements. Ms. Timekeeper, how much time do they have? 2 minutes this
That's
time.
all?
And
All
we
right.
begin with you, Mr. Durso.
Okay, what an honor. I want to once again thank the League of Women Voters, the moderator, who's done an excellent job, and all of you for being so patiently went through 2 very informative debates. I want to thank my opponent here, Matt Varvaro, for keeping up the high standards, high road, and I appreciate that. And I think we succeeded doing that.
I think so too.
And again, all of you that's still here, you could have gone home, but you're still here. You must like what we're saying here. So, the town of North Hempstead for 46 years has been the home for me, my wife Maria was here, and our 4 children. As a family, we're actively involved in youth sports and many community and civic organizations. We have cultivated many friendships less than a lifetime. That is what is important to me, that the assembly districts in this town continue to flourish. For this to happen, we have to do some work in Albany vis-a-vis reform, so on and so forth. And working at the administrative side of government for New York City for many years, I've learned how best to serve the people by achieving real positive results that elevated people's lives. Working in the legislative side of government as a councilman for 4 terms, I learned how to work cooperatively with other elected officials to effectuate a real change. As an immigrant, my life is a statement to the true value of hard work and the highest integrity and moral standards. As a young man growing up in Italy, I became interested in local politics, and I paid special attention to the work of the corrupted public official. And I dreamed that one day I too could be elected to a position of authority, that I could use that office to reform the system. Okay. So I bring all this, this philosophy, this list of accomplishment to Albany, and I humbly ask for your confidence and for your support. Thank you very much.
All right, well, I just want to thank the League of Women Voters once again for sponsoring this forum, and I want to thank Mr. Durso and echo his appreciation to all of you for staying out here, pretty late on a work night. So thank you all. Look, I think that this election is a referendum on the state of politics in Albany. If you are sick and tired of what's happening in Albany, if you're sick and tired of the corruption, if you'd like someone who's an outsider, who's bringing fresh ideas and a new approach, a bipartisan approach, independent views to the table, I think that there's one choice in this race. And so I would just urge you, when you go to the polls, keep that in the back of your mind. Who has the more independent approach? Whose approach reflects the independent nature of this district? Who's going to make it his undying mission to fight for comprehensive ethics reform in Albany? I think that I've demonstrated throughout this campaign that I am that candidate, frankly. So I just want to thank you all again in advance for your support. This was a great forum. I appreciate the fact that we were able to debate issues and not get into any political nonsense. So thank you all again, and please, please, please remember to vote on November 8th.
Thank you.
Thanks. Do it again?
Yeah. Thank you.
Good luck. Fun. Thank you so much. You too.
Mr. Durso.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
Hold it.
between your car. I couldn't buy Mercedes